I didn't make it up. And I feel it. I feel like I'm the tail end of Gen X and the beginning of the millennials because I am just old enough or just young enough to really understand how to effectively use Facebook. So I can use Facebook with great efficiency. Twitter, I'm both too young and too old for. And,
How about
and
Instagram? Instagram is like the new you.
Instagram, I understand what it is. You start getting to like TikTok and
Like,
what was that ghost one? I don't remember what the little ghost. That's the, and we are live. So that we're joined this hour by Jeanne Marie Spicuzza, who uh, I met at a poetry venue years ago. Let's just get right to it. Let's tell that story. How did we meet, Jeanne?
so we were lined up at the Poetry Lounge on Fairfax in Los Angeles. Together we must have been, and then you performed in the open
Mm-hmm.
mic, and I performed in the open mic toward the tail end. I did my poem "Sluts" because the one of the hosts' girlfriends said, do that sluts poem." I was like, okay, I better do it. And you came up to me afterwards, and I think you were driving by then, but you were a young man, and you were like, "Hey, that was cool," and I was like, "Yours was too." It was like a mutual admiration, and you invited me to the venue you mentioned in Venice, Mosaic.
Yeah,
We had something in the Argonaut about it. It was
yeah,
really cool. It was really cool, like tons of poets, like all just kind of doing their thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those days were just getting. I was just getting started out, but you had done some things in the world of poetry, and I remember talking to you more at a little longer in Venice, and you told me some of the things. Now you're right. I was just getting started, and you told me some things were possible in poetry, and they could happen very quickly, and I was really shocked. You told me that within 3 months of being of just getting on stage and doing open mics, you had stepped on some fairly large stages that just blew my mind. Can you share with the audience what they were?
Yeah, it was like I remember within the first 3 months, I won my first slam, and it was actually against a pretty big nationally known poet named Sean McNally, who'd been in the United States of Poetry with Matt Cook, and it was actually through that slam experience that I was invited to perform at Lollapalooza just a couple months later. So that was Lollapalooza 1994. God, now I'm like dating myself. 1994. So I and a group of poets, we were all up on the stages doing poetry and spoken word at this city national festival. It was really cool.
Yeah, yeah. So what was for those who don't for those who may have been born in like 95 or something, dating myself as well. For those who are born uh after post Lollapalooza, Lollapalooza was at the time like the kind of one of the biggest things that had happened since Woodstock, really. I mean, it was I mean, then they brought Woodstock back, which was a fiasco, but Lollapalooza was kind of like kind of Gen X's Woodstock. It was Lollapalooza was
It
huge. I
was
mean,
big. It
Lollapalooza
was
was
big. I
huge.
mean, you had some major acts through Lollapalooza, and I remember we would go and we would because we were on the grounds, we'd sneak around when we weren't performing and watching, these guys and just being like, wow, this is huge. And the masses of people, and people going on multi-city tours. And this was really, when spoken word was really beginning to peak too, because even it started like 83, where Mark Smith was just getting into slam. And interestingly enough, because he was doing this at the Green Mill in Chicago, Milwaukee was the first city he naturally gravitated to continue this slam movement. So that's the city I'm from originally. And in fact, I remember that was a conversation you and I had, because I said, "Oh, I've been living in Los Angeles for 15 years." And you were like, "Oh, well, you're a native now." Like, if you've made it that long.
Yeah, yeah. Just so those people who are listening now don't think that because festivals and things and everything these days like happens. It's the biggest thing in the world. In December we won't even be talking about the coronavirus. I mean, so like that's how we are. We just like blow past things. But Lollapalooza, some of the acts of Lollapalooza, just so everyone gets an idea, for those who don't know, a sense of what it was. I mean, this is like, Lollapalooza had like the Smashing Pumpkins, had like Nirvana, Green Day. I mean, some of the biggest
Yeah,
acts that sold tens of millions of records. I mean, these were enormous. This was like the biggest rock festival of the time. I mean, Lollapalooza was huge. I mean, it was the biggest thing, not just a poet could do. It was the biggest thing a band could be a part of. This was
it was huge.
the biggest bands of the moment of the time. The rock stars of 1990s were at Lollapalooza. This was really
And this was pre Lady Fest, pre Lilith Fair. This was actually something I think that helped to reignite the festival experience beyond the Woodstock experience of the boomer generation. So what we owe a lot to these festivals that occurred, like you mentioned, in the 90s and the early 2000s, because they really helped kind of reshape and make these other, events now, Coachella and stuff like that. They kind of created the template for that.
yeah. Little side question. What was the name of the one that Blues Traveler did? Blues Traveler and Fish. I mean, I'm just getting nostalgic for 90s festivals. What was that
Oh
one?
yeah, Fish. Oh yeah. Oh my God. Was that the Bluegrass Festival?
The Hootenanny.
The Hootenanny.
Now we're really
Oh my
aging ourselves. Well, we're both aging ourselves at this point.
Wow, that's so cool. Yeah, I do remember because I was thinking there was the Bluegrass Festival. Newport still has its blues festival. Yeah, the Hootenanny. Oh my God.
Yeah,
Yeah, Fish.
yeah,
Ah, hot
yeah.
tuna. You know, a lot of bands from the 60s that reformed in the 90s.
Mm,
The new bands like Fish, Hot Tuna, because Fish came out of Grateful Dead and Hot Tuna came out of what was it, Airplane, and all it's like it's pretty, yeah, Cream, and all these other bands. It was pretty cool.
it's
It
pretty
was
cool
like
stuff.
it was kind of like a renaissance. It was kind of like a
Yeah.
renaissance. People like are often like, oh, the 90s.
Mhm.
But the reality is that there was quite a lot of interesting stuff going on in the 90s.
See, this is why you call me a millennial, and I tell you yes and no, because like I can recall that. I mean, like I was too young to be there, but I remember. I remember.
Maybe
I
you were
remember.
just maybe you were ahead of your time because I'm still convinced you're a young kid. I'm
I
convinced that
remember.
you're still a
Yeah.
kid.
I remember the fact of the Hootenanny. I don't. I wasn't like I was there, but I remember. I remember it. I remember it. So like I remember that was there. Um.
I have a very good Lilith Fair story. I took my daughter at the time because I promised her, but I was suffering from this terrible migraine. So I had these very dark glasses on and my black clothes, and I'm walking around, and my daughter's got one arm, and my friend Jeff has the other. So a bunch of people are like, "Oh, who's that? Who's that?" Like they think that I'm like this super important rock star
Yeah.
because when in reality it's just my two friends looking like handlers just trying to get me through the festival because I'm going with this big migraine. But it was amazing. It was one of the
Yeah.
years I think that Alanis Morissette was there. Alanis Morissette.
A lot of.
It's
Yeah.
like,
Everyone
oh
out
my
there, you ought to know about Linus Mars.
it's
Oh
pretty
man, that
awesome.
was the peak. The peak.
The peak.
So
It's
you
incredible.
you okay? So you didn't perform at Little Fair, but you did perform at Lady Fest. Can you tell us about? Can you tell our audience about that experience?
Oh, Lady Fest is amazing. So my very first Lady Fest was Lady Fest Glasgow in Scotland. That was a remarkable experience. It was all of these 18 to 22-year-olds. They were all college students and they organized this. They had us in hostels, they had restaurant tickets, and anywhere you went in Glasgow, if you were looking for something, the people didn't just point to it, like they'd actually walk you over. Do you know where this venue is? They'd walk you over. Very historic city and so friendly and very cool and so well organized. If ever there's a doubt that young people are capable of high levels of organization, I have no doubt in my mind because I observed it. They were so good. And it was so interesting because I checked into my youth hostel, and it was me and not one other person like it was for some people. I had like an entire band from France called Lack of Reason, which ended up being a very appropriate name for them because they were these like crazy, like French, like traveling circus people.
Yeah.
I swear to God, it was so funny, like never sleeping all hours of the night. You know, they had their boyfriends sleeping there. I think there were at least 16 people at one that time, and I'd flown for like many hours, bussed for many hours, trained on for many hours. And I don't think I slept. I did this really great performance, which just goes to show that sometimes your best work is when you're so thoroughly exhausted
Yeah.
that you can't your filters aren't there anymore, you know. And it was just it was amazing. It was really amazing. It was
Yeah.
such
Yeah.
a great experience.
It's like you
And in
self.
fact, Kat Bjelland from Babes in Toyland, who
Oh,
is
wow.
very close with Lydia Lunch, and she worked a lot with Courtney Love. She was there, and she did an amazing show. I mean, these were the kind of things that you would experience. You would see these remarkable artists face to face, right in the right in the back room or whatever, all together. It was really cool. It was
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. Yeah, I was gonna say like yeah. Sometimes it's like almost like when you haven't slept and you do a show. It's like almost like you induced an out of body experience, like self-induced.
Hallucinatory out of
Yeah,
body experience.
hallucinatory, like state.
It's
So
kind
for
you're right though.
artists,
It's cool because you get to see how far you can take yourself and how much your artistic nature is so a part of you that it just kicks in automatically. You don't even have to try, you don't even have to think about it.
yeah,
And I
well,
did other lady fests beyond that, and there were a lot of train rides, a lot of bus rides, a lot of plane rides, a lot of staying in hostels or on people's floors, on people's couches, because we were kind of like the people's rock stars. We were still like we weren't staying in like, Marriott's or Ritz's or anything like that. But it's been quite a movement, and I think we have a great debt of gratitude to Mark Smith because I think with the poetry slams, he really beyond poetry slams, he really created a renaissance of performance poetry. He really helped stimulate that in a
yeah.
huge way from the
Have you ever,
80s on.
have you ever gone? Have you ever done a show at the Green Mill?
I did many times. That was one of my first shows outside of Milwaukee, actually. I performed before the Grand Slams in Chicago. And I did a poem called Moist Eyes. And I said, this is a poem about how Wisconsin and California do not always mix. And I got a lot of laughs for that. I had no idea it was so funny. I was like, I guess that is funny.
I don't know what the hell that means, but it's hilarious.
I don't know why it's funny. It's like I
What?
got the biggest laugh, and then I won him over, and I was like, okay, this is cool. It just seemed like you had this perfect blend of people who are extroverted and introverted, people who want their work to be seen, who want to be with people, who want to connect with people, yet are introspective and literary. And there's just something magic about that combination. And there is something about when we connect to each other, we stay in touch. I know people I met like 30 years ago, and I'm still so close to them largely because of the poetry.
Mhm.
It's really interesting, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it is. It is. So California is a major producer of a lot of things that are oftentimes associated with other states, right? So, like we grow a lot of potatoes. So
Mhm.
Idaho is known for potatoes. So Wisconsin is known for its cheese,
It's
right?
true. Yeah,
And
but not the frou-frou cheeses, the really like your cheddars, your Colbys. See,
yeah,
California does the frou-frou in France. They do the frou-frou in Italy. We
say what
try to
you
do
will.
those
Say what you
staple.
will. The two largest producers of cheese in the United States of America are California and Wisconsin. So was this
They do.
poem about a rivalry of cheese? Was that because I can clearly tell your team Wisconsin right now? There's no doubt about. There's no doubt in my
It's the
mind
accent,
where you're
isn't it?
coming from.
I still got the accent.
Well, I
Um,
don't have a Wisconsin accent, but just what you said about it, you immediately were like attacking California cheese.
no,
Trying to get my
no.
question out.
Okay, everybody. Just so you know, when I say frou-frou cheeses, I love the frou-frou cheeses. Okay, I buy like the sheep cheeses from California. This Crescent Midnight Moon is just amazing. No, what I mean to say is that that's probably one of the reasons why they ultimately can coexist and not one flattens the other
Oh,
because California's cheeses. I can't believe California cheese. California, it would come to this. I'm from Wisconsin. Are just you guys do the kind of the more high end stuff, and Wisconsin's a little bit more of the kind of blue collar thing. So I
you're
respect
talking about blue
both.
collar. I mean, you're talking about blue collar cheese coming from Wisconsin. Like, like we make the real cheese, the cheese that like you're like real people eat cheese out of Wisconsin. Like we don't make your frou cheeses. This isn't cheese for a wine and cracker party. This is everyday cheese. You can send your children to school on this cheese. You send your husband out to work on Wisconsin cheese. Like have that cheese ready.
So that's how I come across. That's good
No,
to
no,
know.
no,
I
no, no,
never
no. I mean, no, no, no. I'm just saying. I'm just trying to picture what is the beef
inside my brain right
between Wisconsin and California, and the only thing that my brain can come up with, as somebody that's a lot, studies facts and dates and status, it's the cheese. I mean, it's got to be a cheesy rivalry. It's got. I can't picture it coming down to anything but.
Well, here's another big question then.
Yeah.
How is it possible? And my vegan friends, I'm sorry, vegan friends, I do sometimes eat cheese. I'm Italian too, and I just the Parmesan, there's no replacement.
Italian.
It's
Yeah.
sacrilegious for me to try to put, faux Parmesan on my eggplant Parmesan. Sorry, guys. I know you're gonna criticize me for this. I'm sorry. Um, how I ended up living primarily in two of the cheese states all my life. I don't know how that happened. I know. I have no idea.
Yeah. Me either. I don't know.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's bizarre.
yeah. Yeah. Well, see, if there was like someone was like talking about France versus California, I would assume it was the wine. So I mean, if people from
Wine,
Idaho
the
wanted to
wine,
call them.
the cheese, the cows, the cities, the coastline.
So why don't Wisconsin? I mean, if it was Florida, I would imagine it was oranges. So what about Wisconsin and California don't mix, or sometimes not
I
don't mix?
think I think well, if you hear the poem Moist Eyes,
Mhm.
um it's a largely about the misperceptions of people.
Mhm.
Um because outside of the cheese, I would say that Milwaukee tends to be a very kind of meat and potatoes uh, kind of state. With all respect, there's a lot of farming. It's not all farming, but there's a lot of farming. Um, it does lean Democrat, but largely because it's very blue collar. It's been traditionally blue collar, primarily in the cities. And whereas California was known for doing a lot of dynamic things, like the first to embrace yoga, the first to embrace vegan diets, the first to embrace things like whether it be multiculturalism, uh, bisexuality, homosexuality, um, fair housing, you name it, down the line. And that's the kind of stuff that can freak out middle America sometimes. And so
Yeah.
the perception becomes, oh, all those weird Californians, they are all like in Superman movies getting shocked by earthquakes and floating in transcendental states, and their sun is baking their brain or something. There can be that perception. We forget that.
Mhm.
It doesn't exist as much as it used to, but that was certainly, I mean, I remember telling people I was moving to LA and they're like, aren't you scared of earthquakes? Ironically, my friends in California were like, how did you live in Wisconsin? Aren't you scared of tornadoes? So we're often, yeah.
Yeah.
And you guys had earthquake drills and we had tornado drills. And I think it's just kind of plays into how ultimately people are very afraid of things they don't know or understand
Yeah. Yeah.
more than anything else.
Yeah. I actually had the opportunity to speak at University of Wisconsin Stouts Point.
Oh,
And
Stout. My dad went there.
yeah, wait, really?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big teaching. It's a big teachers college. They have a big teaching program there.
Yeah, that's a kind of environmental group that was kind of tied to the green somehow. They had the green somehow. That's how they kind of heard about me. Or the professor was tied, not the campus, but the professor was tied to it, and that's how they kind of brought me out. And it was a really, really cool experience. I got to speak, I got to whatever. But when I was packing, I just forgot to bring the shoes that I forgot to bring the second pair of shoes that was, I planned to walk around in. So I had left the airport. I ran out. I had these like kind of, these shoes you could walk out in public. They were kind of like Toms, but not exactly like Toms. I mean, they're kind of like those class shoes. And so that coming from California is somewhere where, those will work. But that did not mix with Wisconsin because it was snowing. So I'm walking around in these like kind of cloth shoes in the snow. And then, and the student body there, the professoriate, it was very white. South Point's very white. Wisconsin
Oh
generally,
yeah. Oh yeah.
South Point's super white. But there were like a handful of Chicana or Latinos in the audience. There's two or three, and one of them, because it's school, so you come there for wherever. So one of them was actually I think from the LA area, and they asked me, like. It's Q&A time, and I gave a presentation, did some poetry, and I also gave a speech. And they said to me, like, Q&A, they asked me some questions, and then she asked her question, says like, why are you wearing chanclas in the snow?
That was a question.
Yeah. And without missing a beat, I said, I did it for la raza. So that was California and Wisconsin coming together in that moment of
Good job. You made a nice marriage there. It's not easy to do.
I bridged the gap.
And you're right. It is primarily, it's very, very Caucasian in certain parts of Wisconsin. I have a friend who grew up in a very small rural Wisconsin community, had not really known anyone who was Black American, had not really known anyone who was Hispanic, Chicano, until he went to a bigger city. And not even a huge city, a bigger city for college, and he's a very cool person, but it was like an adjustment for him. And then also, I've noticed that certain, like I'm an herbalist, and he's like, what's that witchy stuff you're doing? It's like freaks him out, and it's like, yeah, I have to really remember that. We definitely don't all come from the same mentality and background. And I guess if our goal is to connect, which I think as artists, we're here to connect, and we're not just here to preach to the choir either. I mean, if you really want to grow as an artist, I think you actually have to sometimes be in front of people, which did happen to me once. I was bicycled with my suitcase on handlebars to an anarchist squat in Belgium, in Leuven. Yeah. And as soon as I arrived, they're like, well, a lot of people here don't speak English. And I was like, okay, but I'm doing spoken word. I'm not a musician.
Yeah.
Rock star. How is this going to work? I'm like, well, they said the audience is used to American music. So if you emote and you're very expressive, and I'm thinking that's not going to be a problem, they'll understand you. And it was a great show. I stood in front of this banner that said capitalism equals terrorism. And the roof was leaking. Raining. This is a squat. And I'm on stage. Yeah. And the roof the ceiling is dripping everywhere.
Yeah.
And all these kids, these post-punk kids, and it was amazing. And this is the kind of thing where you're not going to have these experiences unless you're doing performance poetry. If you're writing, that's great, and it's on a page, but getting out in front of people with your work and getting the immediate reaction to it.
Yeah.
Is a very unique experience. So
definitely.
I think I'm pretty blessed to be in this time that we're in.
Yeah.
Because when I think about you, it's so cool. I mean, you're going out there, you're being invited to all of these places, and you're presenting your work, and you're presenting ideas, and you're sharing, and you're connecting, and you're remembering this person in the audience who asked this particular question. And where are they coming from when they ask you that question? What's their background?
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's
the funny thing
really
was, it was a performance, but it was also a speech. And the speech I had was called "Taco Trucks in Every Corner," and it was about the rise of Trump and all this anti-Mexican hatred and all this stuff about like, oh no, there's gonna be taco trucks in every corner. And I, in the end of the speech, saying, you're right, there are gonna be taco trucks in every corner, but everywhere the taco goes, it actually ends up adapting to the group of people, to other people. So like in LA, you have the Korean taco, right, which is a fusion of Korean cuisine and. So at the end, I was like, yes, it's gonna happen. You're gonna have them here, and they're probably going to be taste horrible to me, but they'll be good to you, right? And I'm like, so like, fear not, Wisconsinites, you're not losing your cheese curds, you're gaining a tortilla. Chocolate chips in every corner, and
you
so that
said
was
that?
Wisconsin. Yeah, that was Wisconsin. And it's blue collar cheese coming
You made them
together.
feel better. Their non-frou-frou cheeses will not be threatened.
No, no, no. They're heartland cheese.
Someone said something to me so interesting recently. A very good friend of mine, also a poet, and another person I connected with poetry in 1993. We're still such close friends. We talk all the time. And he said to me recently, because I mentioned somebody becoming more controlling in my life, and I kind of had to put a little distance there
Yeah.
because it's getting so controlling. And he said to me, they must be feeling very afraid.
Mm.
I thought, oh, that's so interesting. So when we think about racial hatred, ethnic hatred, classist hatred, um, it's interesting if we think about it from the perspective, oh my God, that person must be terrified.
Yeah.
Because you and I had this conversation once about it's difficult to forgive. It's very difficult to forgive. It's very difficult to forgive hatred and ignorance and violence.
Yeah.
But I think you've also discovered for yourself, and I have too, that you carry that around with you. It's a terrific burden carrying around other people's hatred
Yeah.
on your shoulders.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
I try to give it back to them as quickly as possible and get the hell out. My thing is like, whoa, boom.
it's a shitty gift. I don't want it. I don't want it. And throughout the course of my life, and this is not a naivete, and this is not a brushing off of how awful hatred is and the damage it does. It's just, if you eat that like an unholy communion, you suffer for it.
Mm-hmm.
You will have to suffer other people's hatred, and it does eat at you. And what can end up happening is you hate as a response to the hate, which feeds the hate, which in turn accelerates all this hatred going back and forth between people. And there's a point where it's kind of like Gandhi saying an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. It's like at a certain point, where is this going to stop? And who is going to be the one to stop it?
Yeah.
Because the hater probably isn't.
No, definitely not.
Because the hater's reacting from fear, ignorance, intolerance, and many other factors. And then you have the individual who's, for example, the artist. Our job is to go pretty deep. I mean, we don't have art if we don't, right?
Yeah.
So how do we deal with that? That's always been it's not a simple answer. It's an ongoing question in our lives. Because when we're confronted with it, when we're immediately confronted, and I know you must have confronted this at some point, people treating you like you're not even human.
Yeah, all the time.
That you don't have dignity.
Yeah.
You're something else,
So, I mean, there's all kinds of ways and forms of oppression in the world, but I mean, the primary thing that I end up getting, obviously, the most obvious thing, I mean, it comes as no surprise to the audience, is racism, right? But my response to that usually in these like bad, I don't have a mature response. I mean, my response is usually to smack somebody with my resume. I mean, that's usually what I do, and then I'm done. And then I don't think about them later, though.
Yeah.
I really don't. I mean, I remember it, but I don't think about it later because I do think about the story. I think about like how someone tried to like ask me, what are you doing here? You know, because that's the type of racism I typically experience. Now, I mean, also, you know, I'm obviously like, you know, from the wrong place, wrong time, the cops and that, but the, you know, being followed around stores, stuff like that. But the kind of stuff like when I'm in my professional setting, it's always this thing about like being this idea that I'm unqualified or I shouldn't be here, I shouldn't, you know,
Wow.
and being like, you know, like being, I shouldn't be seen as a person who's intelligent or that. Like who, why, who, what, all those like kind of questions like that. And my typical response is always to be like, you know, oh, I've been on C-SPAN, you know, it's like that, you know, it's like, and then later I don't think about it. It's not like if I deal with it in the moment, I won't think about it, you know.
I
So
think
that's
that makes a lot of sense.
it's on the road to actually not caring. Like eventually, I simply will not care. Like you say it to me, and I simply do not care. I am not there yet, but I'm getting closer to it. I feel like right now it's I have to smack you back just a little bit, but then I can walk away. You know, like I have
It
to
reminds me of
be a little bit that type.
I want to say it was a story I read. And it probably was an aspect of, if you've ever read Marge Piercy, Women on the Edge of Time, Women on the Edge of Time. And
No,
Sandra Sis, I think, touches on it, you know, play stuff like House on Mango Street and some of her poetry too. It's kind of like there's this sort of idea of the person who eventually can't hear you. They can't hear that voice anymore,
yeah,
you know, so that when that voice is calling out, it becomes more and more distant. There was a Twilight Zone episode like that, you know,
yeah.
with the parents who couldn't appreciate the children. Eventually, they couldn't hear their voice anymore.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Do you
remember
remember
that one.
that?
Yeah, yeah, that was a good one.
That was a very good one. And it actually, I think I hadn't thought about it before based on what we're talking about, but that could apply. Everything you're telling me says, you know, you get to the point where it becomes a faint echo and
Yeah,
eventually it's not even there anymore. It's
yeah.
not part of your world anymore.
Right, right, right.
That's a great place to be going to, I think.
Yeah. And right now is a great time for a smooth transition. Okay, you mentioned Twilight Zone. That's film and television. You also make films.
I do.
All right, so let's talk about your journey as a filmmaker.
Oh, that's been interesting. So
So
I
not yet what you're working on, but like, you know, just getting
yeah,
into it. Okay, yeah.
I was working on my undergraduate degree in philosophy at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and psychology. I ended up minoring in psych because I did not want to experiment on animals. So I made a lot of trouble for my professors for that reason. I got the animal rights groups and so forth. And while a student of philosophy, I was working part-time at a classical music store. And the manager, my boss, he and his partner, his domestic partner, they marched frequently in women's rights, uh, uh, different protests, including Planned Parenthood. He was a pretty interesting person. He was a feminist before it was very popular for men to be feminists, you know, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And he hands me this compact disc and he says, "Here's something you might be interested in." He said, this is a woman composer from the 12th century.
Wow.
And I was like, "Why haven't I heard of her?" And he said, "Jeanne, you know the answer to that more than anybody," because he knew I was really into feminist studies. And I was like, "Yeah, that's right. I forgot." So I go home and I'm looking at the CD liner notes, and it's all about how this woman was a philosopher, a medieval world leader, a poet, first composer whose biography we have any extensive record of. I'm going, you know, on and on. It just goes on. Herbalist and paint, visual artist, all this. And I was like me, you know, it was almost like an instant sense of like, I feel so validated right now. I was a young person. I was only, 20 at the time. And I put this disc on. This woman wasn't afforded formal training, of course. And it was so transporting. It was like I had to hold on to something to keep myself from being lifted off the ground. And I thought, this is amazing. I want more people to know about this woman. And within about a year, I watched this movie, this novel. It was the movie adaptation of the novel, Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose.
Hmm.
I was just like, I was like, you can do this with philosophy. Wow, something's happening here.
Yeah.
And I spent like an entire summer just writing and conceiving of books and images, and shortly after that I was attending graduate school. So I was in my master's degree program in philosophy. And I just was like, I want to make a movie about this woman. I want to make a motion picture about this woman. I want to bring this woman to life. I want to be this woman. So that was it. That was the crossroads in my life, was like, either you're going to go the academic route or you're going to make movies.
Right.
And at the it was not an option to do both. I mean, graduate school was like 80 hours a week, you know.
Right.
You
So,
can't, it's like people are like, why not both? I'm like, because they're both, you'd have to be two people. You can't. And you know that's how you know if someone's been to graduate school, because you're like, no, you guys don't understand. There's like 40 pages, 80 pages of material to read, sometimes for 3 different lectures every day. You know, you're lucky if you sleep. You know? And so I just realized that was the route I wanted to go. I knew it was risky, but I knew both paths were risky,
yeah.
you know. So I said to myself, I got to make a movie about this woman. I have to. This is like my life's goal. I have to make this movie. And that began the journey.
So for those in our audience who might be unfamiliar, can you tell us a little about you mentioned Umberto Eco. Can you just briefly touch on who that was? I mean, because a wide variety of people watch this, so like
Definitely.
not everyone's heard of Umberto Eco.
Definitely. So Umberto Eco, he wrote The Name of the Rose, Il Nome della Rosa. He wrote Foucault's Pendulum. He's a professor of semiotics in Bologna, in Italy. My professor, my advisor, Fabrizio Mondadori, he's the one of the family of the Mondadori publishers, one of the largest publishers in Europe. So he actually knows him, and he has written a lot about the meaning and value of signs and language. So he's like one of us, basically. His passion for the meaning and symbology of language.
Yeah, people should really check out the work of Umberto Eco. I would
Umberto Eco is amazing. He's an amazing author, and from what I've heard, quite an amazing professor too.
So what came of this movie about this woman composer?
Good question. So I wrote the screenplay. It was the first screenplay I'd ever written. I worked on it with a couple of people, but that kind of fell away, and then I just developed my own script based on my research and my ongoing research. I spent about 3 years. No, it was 7 actually, and I went to Bingen, Germany, where this woman lived, and I walked and I saw, so the screenplay was scored very high. It was like in the top 7% at the Nickel Fellowships in Screenwriting, which is at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. And that's for people who haven't had work produced at that point. It was summoned by the Vatican and given very high honors by their Division of Arts and Culture. And a segment of it was on my poetry CD and discovered by Judy Chicago, the artist who created the feminist exhibition, The Dinner Party, which is just a tremendous, lengthy, fairly comprehensive history of women and feminist movements. And she asked to use the audio segment of the screenplay in her permanent exhibition, which is now at the Brooklyn Museum.
Yeah, yeah.
And what I discovered was, if you want to make like a $15 million period film, you're probably better off starting out with other stuff and building from there.
Right.
So I'm on my second feature now, and my intention is to make 1 or 2 more before we go to the Hildegard, which is like my magnum opus, bringing her to life.
So for those unaware, and again, like it's a wide variety of audience, so not everybody's aware of some of these people who are very, very big in their given fields. Can you tell us a little more about Judy Chicago?
So Judy Chicago is a remarkable multimedia artist who's also a professor, and her feminist installation, The Dinner Party, basically it's set up like a table, and she draws from many and various sources uh, to sort this trajectory of women throughout history. That's really her emphasis, and she's been active for decades. Just remarkable artist, and Guggenheim fellowships, and Art Institute of Chicago, and so many different awards and accomplishments for this person. It's just remarkable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's move on to talk about your latest project, which is
Oh yeah.
in the midst of being rolled out.
Yeah, Night Rain. Actually, right before you and I started talking, Matt, we just got word that we exceeded 10,000 views within the last like maybe 28 to 30 hours of launch, which is pretty great. We're very excited. So Night Rain was inspired by my first experience making a movie, which was The Scarabist, and the stuff that goes on indie sets, because you're not all fractioned off by unions and things like this. You're like whoever's job, the person who picks up the piece of paper is the person who sees it. The person who checks the lights is the person who's standing next to it. Sometimes, like my producer, she was like washing car windows while she was going over the schedule of the day and try to set the light. That's indie filmmaking for you. And so that experience, and it was a really great experience, prompted this idea of, I want to make a movie about making a movie, particularly independent film. And I really wanted to touch on the subject of 1940s because I'd been studying film noir. And this was really before, now film noir has become so popular. But we forget there was a time, like in the days of LA Confidential, when noir, even the very word, threw terror into the industry, because typically noir was not considered commercial.
Right.
And some neo noir, like Chinatown, that's an exception. Miller's Crossing, those were like exceptions to the rule.
Yeah, but one was like in the 70s, one was like, early 90s.
Right.
So long ago, right? Yeah.
Yeah, forever ago. I mean, now the 70s are period. I remember the first time I was like, the 70s are period. Wow. 90s are becoming period. What?
I don't say that.
I know, I know, but the first time somebody called a Scooby Doo lunchbox retro, I was like, well, I still have mine.
When I heard Nirvana on K Earth, I almost died. I was like, and then now I'm hearing like out. Now I remember hearing Outcast on K Earth. They played Hey Ya on K Earth. That was like 2001. What the?
Now, when did this become classic? Oh, one time I was talking to a young filmmaker, and I said, do you ever watch classic films? Oh yeah. I said, have you ever seen Psycho? No, but I've seen Back to the Future. And I was like, I'm scared. When did this happen? What?
Yeah. Life comes at you fast.
So I knew I wanted to get into the 1940s, because what's interesting now about film noir is it is really the only organic original movement that was born out of Hollywood in the cinema. It was the only organic original movement in the industry, in cinema, out of Hollywood. So, which is kind of funny, because Hollywood is not necessarily known for its originality. And a lot of stuff was born out of German cinema and stuff, but this was a very unique movement, and it was very artistic. There's a movie, I think if you haven't seen it, it's called Border Incident. Have you seen this?
I've heard of it.
It's shot in Mexico. It's done like a documentary style film noir. It is so luscious the way it's filmed by the great John Alton. I mean, you feel like you're watching a moving photographic art exhibition. It's so spectacular. And of course, Ricardo Montalban, you can't go wrong. I wanted to bring that kind of artistic vision to it. And I didn't know what I want the subject of the 1940s to be until I read a book by Mary Passios called Childhood Shadows. And it was about her actually growing up with the woman known as the Black Dahlia, Elizabeth Short, the human being, not the image of the brutal murder victim, but the person. And I remember there was a part where she's interviewing one of the sisters of Elizabeth Short, Muriel Short. And she says, Muriel says, we don't really talk about it among ourselves, the murder. But we believe, and I think she specifically said their mother believes that Elizabeth will one day be exonerated. And that hit me so hard because I've been a victim of violent crime. And I remember people saying things, well, like, why didn't you do this? Why did you go there in the first place? Why did you? There was so much like judgment on me as the person who survived the violence.
Yeah.
And I thought that is so sad because that's really true. That's how we often, our culture thinks this way a lot. If you're victimized, if you're surviving racism, well, what did you do? What did you do to someone? Or did you get in their face? What about the person who's perpetrating it? And I thought about the treatments of this woman's life and how much false information has been perpetuated and how many people have gotten on board to capitalize from it, this terrible tragedy. And I deliberately kept her name out of marketing material. We only recently exposed that this is what this is about, but it's coming from the perspective of the human being and what she survived and what she didn't survive and
Right.
who she really was. So that was a large inspiration for Night Rain.
Right. So her murder is shrouded in so much, LA mythology, so much whatever. But as you say, most of what we know about her is how she was killed. I mean, most of readily available information is about how
Yes.
she was killed. So what went into the process of researching her life?
That's an amazing question. And that reminds me that you are definitely a literary, intellectual, educated person
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
because you can't just go on the internet.
Right. Yeah.
Because you will probably have to spend more time correcting the misinformation that you're going to come across. Where well, she went to the Crown Bar and Restaurant. Actually, Ann Toth, one of her roommates for a brief time, who was an extra in movies, and lived with a man named uh, uh, Mark Hansen, who owned the Florentine Gardens, which still stands on Hollywood Boulevard, by the way. The place in the DA files, in her testimony, said no. She actually, I never knew her to go there, and I never saw her there. Um, she lived at Altonito Apartments. Well, if she couldn't afford $1 a night
Mm-hmm.
at the Chancellor Apartments near Hollywood Boulevard, how the heck did she live in the Altonito, which was probably $15 a day? You know, and it gets even worse, because as the newspaper reports, I think as the shame that the law enforcement felt in not finding her and the horrific condition of her body, things changed. She went from wearing a white blouse to a sheer white blouse. She went to being a grifter, a drifter, a prostitute. None of these things. There's absolutely nothing, by the way, to substantiate any of these claims. And it just kind of, Jack Webb wrote about it, in his book. She became more salacious, became almost more like a Pulp Fiction character,
Yeah.
and mythicized, and kind of became, I think, as Mary Passios once said, kind of almost like the mirror projecting men's dark obsessions.
Yeah.
And this really wasn't fair to do to a young woman who simply wanted to live.
Right.
And trying to be glamorous and dignified in rather unglamorous circumstances. because her family was very poor. Her father left the family during the Depression. And this is what's really strange about it. He disappears. No one really knows for sure where this man is. They think maybe he's dead. He literally just abandoned the family and moved to California. And then the mother has to go work. And one of the oldest daughters, Virginia, has to raise the other 4 daughters, largely. And Elizabeth is in the middle of the 5, you know. And all her life, she's gorgeous. She's got this incredible porcelain skin, deep, dark, black hair. Just stands out. And that kind of beauty often becomes a magnet for better or for worse, many different, people's attitudes and beliefs and energies and everything else. And, people will say, well, she was an aspiring actress, yet she never was in a play. She never was in a movie. She never took an acting class that anyone's aware of. What it seems like is she wanted to be famous. She wanted to be a movie star because of her beauty. And at a time when women could do that, they could be in the movies without having any acting background whatsoever. Lauren Bacall was a model before she was have and have not. Yvonne DiCarlo was a dancer. And same with Betty Hutton. A lot of these women just they received contracts based on their looks. Ava Gardner could barely speak without a Southern drawl. Couldn't speak without a Southern drawl. And I think it was Louis B. Mayer who said, she can't talk, she can't act, sign her. She's great, I love her. And this was, women were often chatteled. Men were chatteled too. Studio people, you were property. You were like trading cards. And the studio contracts would say, you have a morals clause. If you break this morals clause, you're going to have another 3 years attached to your contract, another 7. This was before the unions. You had to work sometimes 6 days a week, however many hours they needed you. And you couldn't go outside of like a 5-mile radius of Los Angeles without permission. Ava Gardner describes this in her autobiography. And this is the kind of world that Elizabeth Short is coming into, where she's probably thinking, I might be able to get a contract. I think she also really wanted to marry somebody, but she was engaged to a man and he was killed in war. Yeah. And I see a lot of questions. I see Rita Hayworth. Yes, Rita Hayworth. Yes, Marilyn Monroe. Yes, Maria Felix. Yes, absolutely. I give you, Karina, exclamation point on all of those. We went to the graves of some of these people and looked at the epitaphs and looked at the stories and looked at the world that Elizabeth Short was in. And, there were a lot of wonderful and glamorous things going on, but this was also post-war America. And the future was still very uncertain, much like it is now. And I've seen people kind of make parallels between World War II, post-World War II, and this plague we're in. I'm not trying to downplay certain kinds of violence that took place in any way, shape, or form, but the uncertainty, and the possible exploitation of people and labor and the politics. God, I'm sorry I even said it out loud, because we're in such a painful time in some ways and such a glorious time in other ways. There's a lot of potential for an artistic, not just renaissance. I'm going to call it an artistic revolution, really. I think people will really see the value of arts having been created, the need to connect, the need to communicate, the need to express feelings and cultural realities and other realities and connect globally. So I have a lot of faith in that right now.
Yeah. So, but again, so where did you find this information to really flesh out Elizabeth Short?
I digressed, didn't
I? Beyond just the sensational aspects of her.
Yeah. Excellent. So I mentioned you can't just sit on the internet. So here's the deal. Here's what's interesting. Mm-hmm. If you want to research Elizabeth Short and the circumstances surrounding her very brutal and tragic death, the downtown Los Angeles Library has microfiches. Mm-hmm. And you sit in this little tiny stuffy room and you look one after the other, because a lot of these are not in print anymore. In printed matter. You have to go to the microfiche. You have to go to the downtown Los Angeles Library, and you have to go to the major newspapers of the time and read every single article that you can find that's still available. And a lot of these microfiches, sadly, are starting to wear away. They're starting to disintegrate. UCLA Special Collections. John Gilmore. I won't get into John Gilmore except to say he's a bit of a huckster, but he did preserve certain elements of a collection at the UCLA Special Collections. So when you go in, you sit there and you go through every single file. And they'll only bring out so many at a time. They have this stuff in many, many boxes. It's well cataloged. But if you can't necessarily say, well, I'm looking specifically for this, so you have to go through every folder, every image, every document. There really isn't one single text or treatment that addresses Elizabeth Short with accuracy. But there is one person, and only one person I uncovered through the course of this, who I would consider to be a true authority on this subject. And his name is Larry Harnish. And he's the former New York Times writer-editor. Not New York, sorry, LA Times writer-editor. Correction. And he has so extensively reviewed the material. In fact, he's reviewed the DA files before some of that. I reviewed DA files too, but in a condition when they only send it to you on a disc. He was able to actually go physically and look at the material, and he's seen the police files, which I never have. And you really have to go through like just about every piece of information you can find, and you're still like piecing it together. It's like a labyrinth.
Yeah.
It's like a labyrinth.
So our audience should know when they see your film, and we're gonna drop the links here, just the extensive research that was put into fleshing out the life of Elizabeth Short in in a dignified manner, which has not been done, given her given the amount of time people have spent talking about her. It hasn't been done.
Thanks for recognizing that, Matt. It means a lot. It means a lot. Larry Harnish said, I don't know what the fate of Night Rain will be, but I do know I can see you put your whole heart into it. And I think this was what really got me. He said, because this was the goal, he said, I think that Elizabeth Short would be grateful for your efforts on her behalf. And I've been an advocate of women all my life. And I mean all my life, because we've all had our own backgrounds. Growing up, I watched abuses go on in my own family with women. And ever since I was a kid, I always wanted to be a voice, And it's just, I'm grateful for the opportunity to do that. I think you relate very well to that as your voice.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I think that the plight of women is universal. It's international. It's in every community, and something that we have to. It's something in the world that needs to change.
Any of those isms, any of those really negative isms, I mean, think about it. How can we possibly make a judgment about a person, really, to the depths of that person, just by some assumption, whatever it might be?
Yeah.
Racial, ethnic background, their gender, their economic background. I mean, we see it time and again. We have to catch ourselves sometimes, doing it. And it's something to get beyond, like you were describing. I have now this image in my mind of you, like where those voices get more and more echoey, like in Twilight Zone, and then you don't hear them anymore.
Yeah.
They're not part of your world anymore.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm not there yet, because I still the minute it happens, but I'm at the point where the minute it happens, the minute it gets back, and the minute you try to put that pie in my face, you find it on yours. Your hand gets reversed somehow.
I'm impressed. I still take certain things to heart, and I'm sometimes surprised at how much I do that.
That's why you got to smack it right back. I mean, you got to do it has to be. You have to do it quick.
A little bit of your
quick, yeah.
Emotional kung fu here. I really want to learn from you.
Man. After we're done here, I'll tell you more about it. I mean, I got this whole system. It's called the Way of the Jaguar, right? It's a whole
Really?
Yeah.
You have a name for it? I want to learn this. This looks
the Way of the Jaguar.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because you know what it really comes down to at the heart of it all. I realized, and I've had help realizing this too, that it begins with the really false notion that we're not worth it.
Mhm.
And then the shame creeps in.
Mhm.
And then you have this thing where someone's throwing their shame at you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's their shame,
Yeah.
really. It's some element of that.
Yeah.
Why else would it exist? We know there's only one reason that a person puts you down, and it's low self-esteem. It's a sense that I'm not worth it. And if I'm not worth it, you can't be worth it either. In fact, you got to be worth it less. That's the only way I'll feel better,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
never works. That's
Well,
why
I
it never
mean,
ends.
if they're ready to quickly admit that, then we can walk down that primrose together, that primrose path together of making them feel better about themselves. But if they're not willing to do that and they're still attacking me, then if they don't feel good about themselves, they're about to feel a whole lot worse. Because I'm not here to help you.
Because of your Jaguar?
Oh yeah, I'm not here to help you if you don't want to be helped. If you're not ready to be helped, if you're not ready to let go of those things and become another person and become someone better, and you want to continue to attack me and make me feel the way if you're trying to make me feel the way about myself that you feel about yourself, I'm gonna tell you something. That's not gonna happen. Another thing, this is my investment in you. You must be pummeled so that you may be humbled, so that you no longer stumble. Like we're not going down this
Oh,
road.
I love the way poets express themselves.
Well, no, it's really a question of you're right. It's coming from it's triggered by this like insecurity thing, right? But like just to make a metaphor of it, you're crying, it hurts you, but you're holding a gun and getting ready to shoot me.
Yeah.
I can't let you shoot me just because you're hurting. So
Yeah.
similarly, I can't let you say horrible things in my ear just because you're hurting. I can't let you hurt me just because you're hurting. No.
I have a
So
thought about that, a
yeah,
question for you about that. Um, have you seen a positive impact from you doing a Jaguar? Have you seen someone actually respond, recognize, even if it gets to that point,
yeah,
unfortunately, that they then recognize and maybe some positive shift takes place?
yes. Because what the way the Jaguars is, I'm not talking about physically fighting anybody, but
Right.
um, but what I'm talking about is just like, okay, if we're gonna fight with words. This is what it is. And so
Psychological.
in
Yeah.
logical, right? So in a real fight, right? I'm not gonna walk up to you like this and let you punch me like this. I'm gonna move to the side and hit you. So I'm gonna move to the side, right? So like, what's gonna happen with the way the Jaguar
I'll
is?
go like
Like
this over to.
exactly. I'm gonna move. I'm gonna move
I'll
side to side.
miss. I'll
Right,
miss.
right. Exactly.
You're
So
doing
so
it
the
now. Look
So the
out.
idea is you're trying to make this about me, and I'm gonna flip this around, and I'm gonna come at you in a way you were not expecting at all. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna heighten the absurdity of this. I'm gonna heighten the absurdity of your attack on me. So I'm not gonna let you. I'm not gonna let this. You're angry, and then I get angry, and now we're gonna escalate each other's anger. Instead, you're angry. What you're saying is absurd, and I'm gonna come at you in a way that heightens just how absurd you are. Now, a lot of people will realize, oh my God, this is silly. I'm being ridiculous, and then you can have a real conversation with them. Other people will just get mad and get angry and angry and angry, and I'm just gonna make you look more and more ridiculous. And as you look ridiculous, this is very penalizing, right? So, like, let's take for Donald Trump, for instance. Donald Trump says something really horrible and racist. Other people say that's horrible, that's racist. He says something really misogynistic. That's horrible, that's misogynistic. He ups his racism. He ups his misogyny. He ups his attacks on people. And then what ends up happening is his base that loves him, they get excited. When the only time Donald Trump's numbers ever dip is when he like looks incompetent, when he looks foolish, when he like looks like he's covered in breadcrumbs. Whatever it is that makes him just look like silly is the only time he ever dips, right? So I'm gonna like make you look silly. I'm not gonna escalate your aggression with my aggression. I'm going to make you look absurd, and then you're either going to snap out of it, which is what I would do if I'm like angry and I'm angry first. If I'm angry at somebody and the reason I'm angry is for some reason that exists in my mind and not in the world, and you can make that very clear to me really quickly, I will feel silly. I'll be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking, right?
You know,
Uh,
that's
and I will snap out of it, right? I will snap out of it. Um, and most people will snap out of it. But if I'm just committed to this ideology that I'm always right, I'm never wrong, how dare you, right? Then I'm gonna walk away from the situation because the penalties are too strong because the
yeah,
penalty is embarrassment. I'm getting embarrassed.
yeah.
I need to go. I need to get out of here.
I kind of I've said to people that I liken it to eventually you feel like you're trying to reason with the telephone pole. not to call a
Right.
human being a telephone pole, but you feel like you're trying to reason with a telephone pole. There's no there's no hope that
Right. And so
that
instead of
this
trying to
is
reason
going
with,
to be effective. I'm not
so
going to be
instead of
able
trying
to
to reason with
reason.
them, but I mean, the best thing is just to walk away. I mean, if you can't, just walk away. But if you're in a situation where you can't exactly walk away because there's some mitigating circumstances where you can't walk away, um, you can't just end the conversation. You can't just end the dialogue. Then just re reconfiguring the conversation. If you're stuck in a verbal conflict and you can't get out of it, don't go straight on. I mean, it works the exact same way as if you have to defend yourself, if you have to put your hands up, don't stand in front of the person. Similarly, if you're like in a situation where someone's like trying to insult you, don't stand in front of the insults. Don't try and go back. Like, like your shoes are ugly. My shoes are ugly. Your shoes are ugly. No, instead of that, like, your shoes are ugly. You're wearing a wig. Like it's kind of like you gotta get it out of the realm of whatever they're talking about.
You got to get out of the Chinese finger trap at some point. You got
Exactly.
to
You gotta get
be
out of
on.
whatever
You
it
got
is.
to release yourself to release the other person. You got to release yourself from it. You got to
Yeah.
free yourself. And that's what's interesting too, is as you're talking, and I'm thinking to myself, man, number one, this reminds me of Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose, because one of the aspects of it is this sort of it's historical fiction. So the idea is that there's this book that was never found that Aristotle wrote, the beyond the poetics, the comedies, where it says, make fun of your enemies and use their vulnerabilities against them. And that reminds me of the movie Robert Altman's MASH, the great talk about filmmakers who inspire you. Robert Altman and his MASH, it's the core message of that movie is you can't be sane in an insane world. The world is insane when it wages war, when it wreaks havoc, when it kills itself, when it kills people, when it all this stuff. And if you try to be sane, you're going to be carted off in a straitjacket.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't you
Yeah.
can't be sane in an insane world. So,
Yeah.
and the Hawkeye character always kind of using humor to get through a horror. In fact, the movie La Vita Bella, Life is Beautiful, is about that, using humor to go through a horrific situation.
Right. Right.
So there's something to be said, especially it's what's in your heart. Because if what's in your heart, it's one thing if it's to hate this person, but I get the very definite sense that what's in your heart is I do hope for a change.
Yeah.
If a change doesn't come about, I got to walk away.
Right.
But I'm going to engage this person even momentarily with the idea that there may be a shift and there may be a connection. And I
Yeah.
think
Of
that's a
course.
very good reason to connect with someone,
No, no,
you
no.
know.
I would hope that they would change, and I hope that they would be aware because the world needs changing. The world needs to change. The world needs to changing, and the more people that are invested in changing the world, the more likely that outcome is, right? So I would want people to shift from where they are. I would want them to shift from being kind of foot soldiers of everything that's wrong with the world, right? And become, part of, the forces that will try to bring about a change to make it no longer that way. So I would want that from people. But if you are committed to being this foot soldier and you really want to fight with me, you really want to slander me, you really want to insult me, it's not going to turn out the way you think it will. It's going to get really bad for you because we are not going to talk about. I'll give you an example, and then after that, we probably should wrap up and do your promote your work because I don't want to do this. I don't want to.
I'm fascinated.
Okay,
That's
but
the thing.
but for me, like, I'll give you an example. So there was this guy. He was attacking me. He was saying all these things about me, being very elitist, being like, "Well, I went to the school. What have you done?" Blah blah. But what he had was he had this fake Facebook profile that was a historical figure because he didn't want to use his real name for various reasons, right? And I wouldn't, like, okay, that's your job. You're trying to protect. That's fine. But you're insulting me now, and you're telling me you're elitist. So he was telling about the school he went to. You need to, instead of speaking to colleges, you need to go to college. You didn't get your education, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I could respond by saying, okay, I don't have this or that, but I have spoken at Cambridge. I don't have this or that, but I have done this. I don't have this or that, but I've done, just by resume, right? But instead of doing that, that would just get me into this battle where we're going back and forth where he's like, well, I did this and I did this, and everyone's being elitist, right? So instead of doing that, I'm like, okay, I got to take this offline. Not offline, but I got to take this off center line. Like, like I said, got to move the side. And I said, you're a Scooby-Doo villain. Unmask yourself, coward. Unmask yourself. Like I'm not going to argue with someone who's hiding behind a historical profile.
You're right,
Who
though.
are
You're
you?
right, though. That's
Who
a
are you?
big.
And so everything we were arguing about, and then all the insults he levied at me anyway. So I don't even remember what we were arguing about. So our argument gone, his insults gone, and now he's talking about like, here's the reason why I have this fake Facebook profile. And now he's defending himself about why he's got a fake Facebook profile. And it's over. I mean, the conversation, the insult, him insulting me, the whole thing we were arguing about, it's all done. Now it's just him trying to look not foolish for having a fake Facebook profile.
Yeah.
And that is the way of the Jaguar.
I can learn from this. I
That's
can
not,
learn
it's not
from
going to go the
this.
way you think it is. It's not
I
going to go
can
the way
learn.
you think it is. Yeah.
That's another aspect of inspiration for Night Rain was the fact
Mm.
that I've been basically cyber stalked and harassed for over, what, 15 years now, I think. And it actually started when I became vocal about I was not a supporter would be probably an understatement of the Iraq invasion.
Yeah.
Because I really don't like the idea of killing poor people for oil.
Yeah.
And I really to make other people richer. And I was also a big advocate of Ralph Nader, which was not a popular view after the 2000 elections. And I have my own opinions about that too. And I knew other people who got harassed, but I've been amazed at how long it's lasted. I think there must be paid trolls on me. And the thing is, that is the thing that bothers me. My sister wrote an article. She's a journalist. She wrote an article called Wikipedia Idiots. And it was all about how do you trust the source if you don't know the source?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if online is great. Internet makes so many things possible. A lot of us are far less isolated. We're doing this now because of the internet, but what some people use the internet for is to kind of hide, like sneak attack, you know? And I don't like that. It's like, you know what, criticize me if you want to, but show yourself, show me who you are, and let's dialogue about it. If you have an issue with me, let's talk about it. But all this, sneak attack stuff and accusations, and like you were describing with this guy, just like hurling insults.
Right.
It's like, yeah,
Well,
that's not going to go anywhere.
the thing. I mean, I want to just say this, and then we'll go back to the topic and put your thing, and we can talk later. But the big thing is I would say about that is you don't owe unprincipled people a principled conversation. And another way of saying that is when someone's full of shit, you don't owe them shit. And that, and if you really internalize that, really accept that, like I don't owe an unprincipled person a principled conversation. I don't owe you a principled dialogue because you're not principled. And that's that, and that's the end of it. I mean, like, and how do you know if someone's unprincipled? Someone's unprincipled when their attacks from you come from any angle. Like it's just like, okay, we're addressing this, and all of a sudden now this, now this, now this, now this, now this, and all of a sudden you're surrounded by these insults coming from every direction. From every direction, you're being targeted, right? Because the point is like you're terrible. The point isn't the topic at hand. The point is you suck, right? So it's coming from everywhere, and like that's how you can define. Okay, this person's unprincipled. Now I'm being attacked by an unprincipled person because we're not arguing about principles. We're arguing about whether or not I'm a piece of shit. Okay, that's where we're at.
You already know you're not.
Right.
You're not.
Right.
So
I'm
end
an
of
asshole.
argument.
We're arguing about whether I'm an asshole or not. Okay, well, you know what? We're not going to argue whether I'm an asshole. We're going to argue about whether you're an asshole. And
Did you ever see a movie? It was remade actually with Adam Sandler, but the original was, I think, Burt Reynolds. It was called The Longest Yard.
I never saw The Longest Yard, but I remember its existence.
And that kind of came about with the birth of movies like MASH and stuff.
Yeah, The Longest Yard's also retro, apparently.
That movie.
The Adam Sandler remake is retro. That's how old we are.
That's how old. Oh my god. That just hit me. Whoa.
That's a period piece. It's a classic.
I don't even drink. Where's a drink? Both versions, the core is how can you win when the game is rigged?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the prisoners versus the guards. And there's a lot to be said about that. That wasn't just about, incidentally prisons and guards. It's about the justice system, for example. It's a metaphor.
Yeah.
How do you win if the game is rigged? Do you not play?
Yeah.
Do you play dirty? You have. But what you said about you don't owe anybody principle who's not giving you principle. Are you going to have a fair game when the person's already playing dirty? The
Yeah.
answer is no. There's no way
No.
because it takes two people to make a fair game. It takes two fair parties or
Yeah.
two fair sides or two
Right.
fair individuals to make a fair game. So if
Yeah.
someone isn't playing fairly with you, you're right. There's just you can try, you can stay in your own integrity, but you're not going to have a fair game with them.
Right. Right.
You're right.
And so what I say is that you can walk away from if the situation and the cost and the stakes are very arbitrary. If they're arbitrary, if it's just a conversation, if there's nothing to be gained or lost, I mean, walk away. But if there's like resources, if there's a project, if it's in jeopardizing something that's standing between you and your hopes and dreams, and this person is coming at you in an unprincipled manner so that you do not achieve your hopes and dreams, then I'm telling you, you do not owe that person a principled conflict.
Good.
You really don't. You don't. And like,
Yeah.
I mean, of course you can go overboard. I mean, someone's like being unprincipled and then you like put sugar in their tank of their car or something like that. I mean, of course, like I'm not that's not what I'm
I
saying.
thought you were going to say something worse, like putting rat poison in the sugar. But,
Ah,
not going
well, this
that
is being
far.
recorded, so I'm no, but
I'm
I'm saying no.
Sicilian anyway. We used to hire people to do that. Just kidding. Just kidding. I love my Sicilian American heritage. No, no. They know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Jeanne, I remember you doing this poem called "My Family Is Not Mafia," and here you are perpetuating these horrible stereotypes.
This horrible stereotype.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't do that. But
okay, so
but yes, you're right about that though. Because that's the key though, isn't it? It's like you get to tell the Sicilian jokes, but it's when someone else tries to put that joke on you that it's not cool, right? There does seem to be a wee touch of hypocrisy, but maybe not. I don't know.
No, I mean, shit, man. Like,
not their place to tell me what it means to be a Sicilian in the world. That's my job.
If somebody,
I mean, the interesting thing and what I originally wanted to do, it turned out into a poem about my family, but my original intention was to write a poem about the history of the mafia because the mafia was a people's movement originally. I mean, it became extortion. It became very corrupted because absolute power corrupts absolutely. Unfortunately, whenever there's a certain amount of power involved, it's corruptible.
Yeah. Well, most gangs begin that way. I mean, like if you look at the history of the Mexican mafia, you look at the history of the Crips. I mean, you look at all these different histories. That is always how it starts, and then
it's often a movement for justice and protection.
Well, yeah, and then they start making money. And then it becomes something else, right?
Same with the movie industry. The movie industry, there were tons of women writers, editors, directors, filmmakers. As soon as money came into play, that all changed.
Yeah,
that all changed.
The other, yeah. I mean, yeah, that all changed. So yes, your project. One more time, the name of the latest Night Rain. Tell us about it, and let's.
Night Rain is a group of independent filmmakers led by an actress-producer. They are unwittingly hired by their stalker to make a low-budget period film about the events leading up to the murder of Elizabeth Short. And as they uncover more details about her, they find that they are intertwined with the terror. So that's really the encapsulation of the movie, and it's a very ensemble movie. It's I'm acting in it. A very talented actors, Adam Lessar, who was in a short called Night of the Slasher, Clarissa Thebault, Thessa Lowe, Mattia Chico, Scott Javore, many other talented people. We had a lot of help. When I told them what we were doing, because the Biltmore got some shrapnel from the stories and the myths and the lies, quite frankly, about Elizabeth Short. One of them being she was a prostitute. She used to bring her tricks to the Biltmore. Anybody who's been to the Biltmore knows that's really not that kind of hotel to begin with. Very beautiful. It was built in like 1923. And so when I told them what we were doing and that we wanted to make an authentic portrayal, they basically gave us like Florida rooftop privileges for a discounted amount of money. And we had other places like that gave us a lot of support. It seems to be that there are people, and this is wonderful, there are people in the world who really want to understand things accurately. and want to see people portrayed in a dignified manner, which gives me a lot of hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. I really appreciate you joining me for this, coming almost an hour and a half now. Really
Oh,
appreciate it. Yeah. Before I close out, I do want to point out Karina naming these fantastic women of yesterday's film. I think I see a common thread here. Rita Hayworth was originally born, I believe, Margarita Cancino,
yeah.
something. Yeah, I think Encino. Marilyn Monroe's mother was born in Mexico. Maybe you don't know that. And Maria Felix, obviously the great Maria Felix. Who, if those don't know, they should Google it to find out.
Way to go, Karina.
Icon of Mexican cinema. So I thank you so much, Jeanne Marie, and I wish you the best of luck with the film. And let's not wait 15 years to talk again. No, it's not.
Let's not. I mean, you and I have been communicating through Facebook, but I mean, this is the first time I'm seeing you in a long time. So yeah, like I
No,
said,
it's
it took a play to kind of bring us back.
been about 10 years. It's been about
It's probably been about 10 years.
11. 11, yeah.
Yeah, it's a long time. You've been
Yeah.
doing stuff and I've been, thank you. Oh, thank you, Karina. Thank you. Thank you. Way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You see your Facebook do you see her Facebook picture there?
I do.
Do you see the guy standing next to her
I
with
do.
his hair blowing in the wind?
I do.
Yeah,
And a very small little icon.
yeah.
Beautiful.
That's me.
That's you?
Yeah.
That's you. Ah,
Yeah.
way to go, Karina.
And yeah, over there, yeah, the top one there.
So Karina's on the right.
Yeah. So on hers,
I'll have to look at it. I'll have to look at that picture, Karina. That's
yeah.
beautiful.
And then
Yes.
on my picture, we're on the opposite sides.
You want to know something? I
What's
did
that?
not know that about Marilyn Monroe. We actually we filmed at her grave in Westwood Memorial. I didn't know that her mother had Mexican roots until this moment. Thank you,
Yeah.
Karina. I did not know that. That's pretty awesome. You
Yeah.
learn something all the time. That's the beauty of research. That's the beauty of intellectuals and artists. Like, thank you for constantly, you guys, teaching me new things. I'm always learning.
I learned a lot today.
I respect your work, Matt. I respect the Jaguar, the way of the Jaguar. I've learned a lot, and I look forward to seeing more and more because you've certainly got a lot to say, and the world is a better place for it.
Thank you. You as well. All right. So thank you everyone for joining us this hour, and we'll be back. I'm gonna go eat something. So yeah, I'm gonna be gone for about an hour or two. All right.
I will too.